morning, everybody. It is Monday. I don't know what the date is. I have no idea. I think it's the 9th. Anyway, bench this morning was my raw day. And I don't think I've posted anything about the question. There was two questions. One was overhead press, and the other was the long femur squatters. I think that overhead pressing can be of benefit to bench press if it's used in a smart manner. I think even though it's kind of a compound type movement, it can still be a little tough on the shoulders, especially given how much, depending on how much volume you're doing. I'm not doing that currently because what I've been doing in prep for equipped worlds is I've had 3 flat bench sessions, and that's worked really well as I'm still trying to get used to the tighter equipment, because that it just takes so much time and it takes a lot of energy, and it's so far removed from the double ply stuff. But that's just for me. For you that are doing 2 sessions a week, especially if you're declining, doing something that kind of eliminates some of the shoulder, I think that's very beneficial. And I'll use Jennifer Milliken as an example. She'll run a block like 4 weeks and then gets off of them. And what we have found is that too much for too long tends to bother her shoulder a little bit. She has this, she injured her shoulder where the arm just went dead. I don't want to say it's the right side. Some sort of impingement, something, and so we have to be really smart with it. And so I like to use like a 4 weeks on where we do strict, and sometimes I'll have the set and rep variation, will change depending on the need of the lifter. I like to sometimes do a heavy triple, and then we'll back it off for 2 or 3 sets for sets of 6. And then I like to push press. Not only is it good for shoulders, it's one of those movements where you learn how to make the body do what you want it to do. Learn, to use the leg drive in conjunction with pressing, and that coordination, I think, just helps everything with the upper body. Learning how to leg drive on the bench and those sorts of things. I think it aids it quite a bit. Now, a lot of people are not going to talk about that, and there are people that will likely disagree with that. But it's one of those things where I think when you teach your body, when you learn things that help you use multiple groups and body movement to move a weight, I think it makes you more athletic, and that always pays off dividends with everything that you do. So, yes, I do think that there's benefit. I think you have to be careful and not treat it like a max movement. I mean, it is fun to take a single every now and then, but I think it's just one of those things that if you keep that in mind, where it's an assistance movement, it's like the decline press that we're doing with Mel. We're not doing, the most we will ever do is triples. And that's only occasionally. I try to run that every 3 or 4 weeks, depending on the lifter, and that's depending on, what level, they're at. So definitely there is benefit as long as you treat it, in the manner that it needs to be, and don't go crazy with it. As far as the long femur lifters, there's 2 people that come to mind. And I apologize for not remembering who asked the question, but I do remember saying that they were an IPF lifter. And 2 IPF lifters that come to mind is Linda Schaefer. So you have a female example. Linda won nationals. It was when the weight classes were different. So I don't remember. She was a super. So I don't know. I just don't remember what the weight class was. It'd be 84 plus now. And she went on to win Masters Worlds too, and was a great deadlifter, obviously. And but she always struggled. But one of the things that I've learned is a lot of it for the longer femur lifter is all about positioning. And Brad Gillingham comes to mind, who is probably one of the premier deadlifters of all time. And Brad is the whole reason why I started dabbling with a hook grip for powerlifting. We'd always used it for Olympic weightlifting, but I'd never considered it until later. Now that's a different conversation, so I'll save that for another video. But I think it really comes down to positioning and what your groove is, and then really watching bar path. I think especially the lower, low bar lifters, you really have to be careful, because you can get that chest out just too far over the toes, and the bar path carries it away from the mid-foot. So those are the things I like to think about, pushing the knees out and making that the first movement. Now again, that's going to be a non-traditional thing, because a lot of people want to push those hips back and then the knees out. And I think with the longer femur lifters, if you lead with the knees, which is what I teach, because you're always going to have, even with a high bar positioning, by nature of the movement, you're going to have a little bit of an ergonomic lean. And so what we want to make sure that we're doing is that bar path is over the midfoot, and that your hips are where they need to be. So I like to use a lot of different things, but primarily I love using pause squats, because I think it's one of those things that teaches you to lead with the back of your head and lift the chest up in the squat and keep it there, keep it nice and tight. Because a lot of times people get in the hole and they try to be dynamic, and they tend to get a little forward. So without seeing your squat video, it would be hard for me to dissect what you as an individual should do. But I really like to teach the lifter how to put as much pressure on those hips as we can, as a mover. And so we'll do pause squats with the competition stance, and then I like doing what I call a sumo wide squat. So we go out wide, and you really learn to push the knees out, and the hips become a primary mover, versus like a close stance where it's quad based, and even your competition stance. I'm trying to engage those hips more. We do these light, 95 to 135 pounds, depending on the lifter and the size. And it's not about how deep you can get, it's about staying as upright as possible, going as deep as you can without the chest dropping. Now, if that's above parallel, then so be it. But think more, of stretch versus a squat. And what it'll do is it makes those hips the primary mover, and you'll develop a lot of power that way. And so when you bring your stance back in after several weeks of doing that, we use it as a finishing movement. Our lifters are more supple, and they're stronger in the hips. Box squats are tough, man. It's one of those things that if you don't do it correctly, that's a risk versus reward kind of thing. There is definitely benefit of doing them, but you just have to be so careful not to just sit on that box in the hips and the lower back, especially, taking all the weight. There is definitely benefit to doing them, but those are some of the remedies. A lot of times it's really looking at positioning and form and seeing if there's something to tweak there. But I know a lot of longer femur lifters that squat very, very well. And so, those are things to try. The best thing to do in this case, what I would suggest, is that whoever is coaching you, if it's Mel, and have her look at it, and if you want me to, I'm more than happy to do so as well. But there's always a method to helping someone, because it's definitely a leverage game, and that little bit of leverage can mean 2.5 kilos. And if you're an IPF lifter, if you can get that extra 2.5 kilos, sometimes that's the difference of winning and not even making the podium. So I completely get it. But I would certainly be interested. And if you're a larger person, what I find with especially my larger females is hips are really a big issue. Hips and shoulders. I don't know why. I don't know if that's just the how you're built. I don't know, but that's what I typically run into. And I've got a big girl right now, Christina. I would guess her height she's 6 feet tall. She's definitely, bigger. I have coached Melissa Garrett. If you don't know who she is, it's Melissa Garrett Kylo now. I used to coach her and her husband. Melissa was, see, she's about 6'2", 6'3", and when she squatted 700, she was well over 350 pounds. You know, just a big human being. And she was one of the, I think she's one of the 6 or 7 women in the world. At the time, she was number 3 when she first did it, to hit 500 pounds in the bench press in a bench shirt. And super strong. She also won strong woman nationals one year. So, I mean, this was someone that was super strong. But, you know, she's long everywhere, but had a 700-pound squat. Again, it was in gear, but it was still 700 pounds. So there's ways. I would look at how other people train that are built like you and see what they do and add it for a block, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, even 8 weeks, and see, you know, if those things give you, you know, a little bit more leverage. But don't be afraid to try it. And again, if you try those wide sumo squats, I always do them at the end of the session, and I do them light. I mean, it does not have to be heavy. It's not a movement that's meant to be heavy. So give those a try, and if you've got more questions or want me to look at video, just shoot me a message. All right, guys, have a great Monday.